Chapter 2. The Claws. They rode through the night. Saoirse had expected a camp, a rest, some concession to the fact that she was human and humans required sleep at regular intervals. She had underestimated the Sylvain relationship with darkness. They moved through it the way fish move through water, not conquering it, simply belonging to it, and the general set a pace that was not cruel but was entirely indifferent to whether she found it comfortable. She kept up. She would have kept up if it killed her. By the time grey light began bleeding into the sky through the thornwood's canopy, she had catalogued the following. The forest changed approximately 4 miles past the border, the quality of the air shifting from the dry cold of the ember territories to something older and denser, like breathing in the inside of a library. The trees grew taller and closer, their bark silver-white, their roots enormous and visible above the ground in complex systems that the horses stepped through with practiced ease. Bioluminescent moss grew in patches along the roots, faint blue-green, just enough light to navigate by. She had not seen this in any of her books. She filed it away. She also catalogued Erevan. He rode directly ahead of her, slightly separated from his soldiers, and he had not spoken to her since the gate. This was not hostile silence, or not entirely. It was the silence of someone who had assigned himself a task and was executing it with total focus, which happened to not include her. She recognized this mode. She had used it herself on people she couldn't afford to think of as people. She found she did not like being on the receiving end. Around dawn, they stopped at a way station, a low stone structure built into the roots of an enormous tree, almost invisible until you were upon it. The soldiers dismounted with quiet efficiency. Someone produced food. Saoirse dismounted, checked her horse out of habit, and accepted the water and the wrapped parcel of provisions handed to her by a young Sylvain soldier who looked at her with the contained fascination of someone who had never seen a human up close and was trying very hard not to appear to be staring. "You can stare," she told him. "I'm also staring at all of you. It seems fair." He blinked. Then, startled into it, he smiled. Erevan appeared at her shoulder. "Don't," he said, to the soldier. "Not unkind. Definitive." The soldier turned and found somewhere else to be. Saoirse looked up at the general. He was taller up close and the morning light did interesting things to his coloring, turned the silver of his hair more white, made the gray-green of his eyes look briefly, startlingly alive before he regulated whatever had moved through them and they settled back to neutral. "He was being friendly," she said. "I was being friendly. Friendly is not a threat. You are a human political hostage in Sylvain territory," Erevan said. "Every interaction you have with my soldiers is a potential complication." "What kind of complication?" "The kind where they form opinions about you, and opinions become attachments, and attachments become divided loyalties." Saoirse ate a piece of whatever the bread-adjacent thing was, dense, slightly sweet, better than she'd expected, and considered this. "You're worried your soldiers will like me. I'm managing variables." That's a very bleak way to describe people. Something tightened in his jaw. Not anger, something more like the expression of a man who knows he's being maneuvered toward a position and is deciding whether to resist it. "Eat. We leave in 20 minutes. Are we going to talk about the claws?" she said, before he could turn away. He stopped. "At some point," she continued, keeping her voice even and practical, "you are going to have to tell me exactly what living as a Sylvain hostage entails. What I'm permitted to do, what I'm not, where I'll be housed, whether I'll have access to information about the investigation, what the exit conditions are. I've read the treaty's original text and I know the clause is deliberately vague. It was written 300 years ago by people who didn't anticipate needing it, which means interpretation is at your discretion. I'd rather know your interpretation now than discover it later." She watched him. She was good at watching people and reading the microgravity of their responses, what they allowed themselves to react to, what they smoothed over. He was harder to read than most, but not impenetrable. He was, she thought, slightly surprised that she had read the original text. "You'll be housed in the Thornwood Citadel," he said, after a moment. Your own chambers. Limited movement within the outer ward. You'll be accompanied at all times outside your quarters. You will not be given access to military or intelligence briefings. And the investigation is not your concern. It became my concern when my father used me as currency to avoid a war that someone else manufactured. She kept her voice clean of heat. Heat was a luxury. Someone killed that tree. Someone who understood covenant magic well enough to do it slowly, to prevent either side from sensing the fracture. That is not a Sylvain grievance made rash. That is a long, intelligent plan. And whoever made it is very much still in play. Don't you want to know if they have reach into the human court? The gray-green eyes held hers. Something was happening in them, that shifting she couldn't fix, color moving like weather. You think it might be your brother, he said. He said it the same way he said everything, level, stripped of opinion. But he had said it, which meant he had already thought it. I think, Saoirse said carefully, that whoever proposed my name for this exchange had to know that I would be accepted. Which means they had intelligence on the Sylvain side, specifically, on what kind of hostage you'd find valuable enough to agree to. She paused. That's a question you should be asking too. Who on your side suggested the clause, and why did they suggest now, after 300 years of never needing it? The silence stretched. A bird called somewhere in the canopy above them. Something musical, complex, nothing like the birds she knew. Eat the rest of your food, Erevan said. We leave in 15 minutes. He walked away. Saoirse watched him go and ate the last of the bread thing and thought, he didn't deny it. Any of it. He let me make the argument and he absorbed it and he said nothing that meant I was wrong. Which meant either he already knew, or he was considering that he should. Either way, a crack in the wall. Small. She had worked with less. The Thornwood Citadel emerged from the forest the way all genuinely powerful things did, gradually, and then all at once. First there was a change in the trees, they grew denser, then suddenly opened into a vast ring of cleared space, and in that space, the citadel rose. It was not built so much as grown, or it had been, 3 centuries ago, when the Sylvain's relationship with living architecture was in its full force. The walls were stone threaded through with root systems, trees incorporated into the structure at every level, their canopies forming a second roof above the actual one. It was enormous and vertical and deeply, quietly alive. Lights moved in the windows. Guards moved on the parapets, silver-haired and still. Saoirse had prepared herself, intellectually, for this. She had not prepared herself for the feeling that arrived when she saw it, that low-frequency recognition again, stronger here than it had been at the dead tree, a resonance in her chest like a string being plucked. She had felt it occasionally at home, usually near old things, old boundaries, places where power had pulled for a long time. She had always suppressed it before it could develop into anything. Here, surrounded by the deepest Sylvain territory she had ever been in, it was harder to suppress. She suppressed it. The gates opened. They rode through into a courtyard paved with flat stones that had moss growing in perfect geometric patterns between them, not unkempt, cultivated, as deliberate as a mosaic. Stable hands appeared. Saoirse dismounted and was, immediately, stared at. Not rudely, not hostilely, but thoroughly. Every Sylvain in the courtyard looked at her with that same quality of focused attention that was starting to feel like a cultural trait. They looked at things the way they meant to understand them, which was different from looking at them to evaluate or judge. She looked back. She had decided this already. She would not flinch, would not minimize, would not perform harmlessness. She was here against her will in service of someone else's crisis and she intended to survive it with her intelligence intact. A woman came down the citadel steps at a pace that managed to be both brisk and unhurried. She was Sylvain, tall, silver-haired like the rest, though hers was worn loose to the shoulders, with dark amber eyes and an expression that Saoirse, who was good at faces, could only describe as carefully delighted. She stopped beside Erevan, looked at Saoirse, and said something in Sylvain too rapid for Saoirse's limited knowledge of the language to follow. Erevan replied, brief and flat. She replied to that. He replied again, shorter. She says your Sylvain is non-existent, the woman said, in flawless human tongue, turning back to Saoirse. He says it's adequate. He hasn't heard my Sylvain, Saoirse said. No, the woman agreed, with the air of someone storing something for later. He hasn't. She extended a hand, a human gesture, Saoirse noted, deliberate, chosen. Thessaly, I'm his second. Saoirse took it. The grip was firm and assessed her without pretending not to. She liked it immediately. Saoirse, I know. Come. I'll take you to your quarters. Thessaly glanced at Erevan. Something passed between them, some compressed communication that had the quality of a very long argument conducted in silence. He looked away first. Thessaly smiled. Very small, very satisfied. The quarters were not a cell. She had prepared herself for a cell, or a cell dressed up as something else. They were instead a set of 2 rooms on the 3rd level of the Citadel's eastern tower, a sleeping chamber with a bed built into the wall like a ship's berth, a deep window seat overlooking the forest canopy, a writing table, a fire already lit. The 2nd room was a study, filled with books. Saoirse stood in the doorway of the study for a long moment. He had them brought from the lower archive, Thessaly said, from behind her. When your name was confirmed for the exchange. Saoirse stopped, recalibrated. He stocked the study. He said a hostage with nothing to do is a hostage with too much time to plan. A pause. I think that was meant to be practical and it came out almost human. Saoirse walked into the study and ran her fingers along the spines. History, covenant law, natural philosophy, a complete collection of Sylvain border records going back 2 centuries. Either he had given her things to keep her occupied, or he had given her things she might actually need and was calling it something else. She thought about that. She thought about it for quite a long time. He'll want to speak with you in the morning, Thessaly said. Formally, the terms of the clause, your restrictions, the protocols. Tonight is yours. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Looked back at Saoirse with those careful amber eyes. It's hard, at first. The forest. If you find it pressing, somehow, that's normal for humans. Is it? Usually. Thessaly's voice was even, but something moved behind it. Sleep, if you can. She left. Saoirse stood in her study full of books chosen by a man who claimed she was only a variable, and listened to the thornwood. It was not silent. That was the thing she hadn't expected, had not been in any book. The forest was not silent at night. It breathed, not literally, or perhaps literally, she wasn't certain, but there was a sound to it, low and continuous and complex, like a chord played so slowly it was only felt and not heard. That feeling in her chest, the resonance, the recognition, here, at night, in a room full of old Sylvain knowledge, it was loudest it had ever been. She pressed her hand to her sternum, over her mother's pendant. What are you? She had asked her mother once, when she was 6, because her mother had looked at a dying flower in a garden and it had lived again under her hand. Her mother had smiled and said, yours. I am yours, that's enough. 3 weeks later she was dead. Saoirse sat down at the writing table, lit a candle, pulled the nearest book toward her, the Border Records, Volume 1, 200 years ago, and began to read. She would not sleep. There was too much to understand, and she had always done her best surviving in the dark. Erevan stood on the parapet of the western tower and looked at the light in the eastern window. She had been awake for 2 hours. He had been tracking the light with the particular awareness that he refused to examine too closely. It was security awareness, it was hostage management, it had nothing to do with the way she had said you're worried your soldiers will like me with that dry, precise delivery that had almost made him. Nothing. You're watching her light, Thessaly said, from the doorway behind him. I'm watching the perimeter. The perimeter is not on the eastern side. Thessaly. She came and stood beside him, following his gaze to the warm square of gold in the dark tower face. She reads fast. She's already on her second candle. How do you know that? I checked on her. That wasn't. She's 24 and alone in a foreign territory because her father handed her over like a trade good, Thessaly said, calmly, with the particular calmness of someone who has decided they're right and is not interested in debate. I checked on her. She was fine. She didn't see me. A long silence. The forest breathed below them. She knows about her brother, Erevan said. Suspects. That's different. She made the argument without prompting. She's been thinking about this since the negotiations. He paused. She read the original treaty text. I know. Thessaly's voice was careful now. She also had a reaction when she came through the gates. Erevan went still. A small one, Thessaly said. She controlled it immediately, but I was watching and I've seen it before. A kind of recognition. She glanced at him sidelong. You know what that means. He did know. He had known it the moment he had seen her in the negotiating hall and felt, not the usual dull awareness he carried for threats, but something sharper, older. The same instinct that had made him agree to accept it before he'd thought through whether he should. It doesn't change anything, he said. It changes everything. Thessaly, she has Sylvain blood. His second-in-command said it quietly, into the dark, the way you said things that were already true and didn't need volume to prove it. She doesn't know. You know. The archivist knows. And someone, whoever killed the tree, whoever arranged this exchange, they know too. She turned to face him fully. She was not chosen at random, Erevan. She was chosen precisely, which means someone sent her here for a reason that has nothing to do with the hostage clause. The light in the eastern window moved slightly. She had shifted in her chair. Alive, reading, 24 years old with her father's politics already cutting into her and a secret living in her blood that no one had ever told her about. I'll brief the archivist in the morning, Erevan said. And her, when do you tell her? His jaw tightened. When I know what it means. And what it costs her. Thessaly looked at him for a moment with the expression he'd known for 60 years. That particular look that meant she was feeling something on his behalf that he would not permit himself to feel. Then she turned and walked back inside. Erevan looked at the light. Saoirse of the Ember Throne turned another page in a book about borders and blood, and did not know he was watching, and did not know that the recognition humming in her chest was a language she had always known but never been taught to read. He should look away. He looked at the light until it finally went out, very late, when the forest was at its quietest and the night was deepest. Then he turned away and did not let himself think about why he'd stayed. End of chapter 2.